Hello. It's one thing to refuse to pay the congestion charge in London, and it's quite another to be driving without insurance, I suspect. I don't drive, so all this is a sort of open book to me, or closed book. I'm not sure what sort of book it is, but anyway, it's not a book I read. But I am interested because Piers Corbyn is the person who was driving a car decorated with sloganized banners saying he wouldn't pay the low emissions charge, can't pay, won't pay. And he was en route to a meeting in Cambridge when he was stopped in St John's Wood, and it turns out he didn't have insurance. Now, I know Mr Corbyn from of old. In fact, on the last election day, I was with Mr Corbyn, and indeed I was with Boris's sister and his father and a number of other people. And I've met Mr Corbyn on a number of occasions. He's always interesting and always utterly peculiar. Now, is he harmless? Well, maybe. Maybe. That's certainly, I think, how he gets away with it. People say, oh, it's just Piers. It's just Piers. He's vocal and he's defiant, and but the problem is he's got this link. He is the brother of the former leader of the opposition, and actually he plays up to that association. I remember the first time I met him, he went through this elaborate game of trying to get me to identify who he was, which just very slightly arrogant. In fact, I'd been drawing a picture of both him and his brother that morning, so I knew exactly who he was. That he goes on to wind up, to encourage the anti-vax lobby, and he puts out slogans that are faintly irregular and could be interpreted as very dangerous. Hammer to death those scum, he's supposed to have said, and burn down their offices. And this is about MPs. Well, his brother was an MP. His brother still is an MP. I suspect he's very selective about which MPs are going to be on the receiving end of these slogans. But it's much more worrying when he's doing this, when he's at the aggressive end of protest. Now, remember, protest is a Latin word, which means to shout. It doesn't simply mean to object to something. It means to shout, and Piers Corbyn is within that tradition. But I think when he's saying rather alarming things, and people like David Ames are stabbed to death, we need to pull back from the sloganizing and engage more genuinely with people who do not share our opinions. I think it's the same with, I think he's drawing on the same traditions as those who might stand on the corner of the street and Bible bash. And I think possibly there's a case to be said that this is outdated in the 21st century. Surely we can all have access to this information today, and we do not need people to be shouting about it on the street corners. We have been so assaulted by advertising that I think we have become immune to this sort of behaviour. And I would hold, on the one hand, this is positive. I think this is something we need to talk about later, but we need instead of shouting, we need to be engaged in debate and discussion. And I would suggest we should be engaged in debate and discussion with almost anyone. In fact, as I say this now, I think I would even be prepared to engage in discussion with somebody like Mr. Putin. If Mr. Putin were to invite me to tea, I would probably accept, though of course I would be worried about the possibility of being poisoned with Novichok or plutonium-210. I mean, whether one would actually drink the tea that was offered by Mr. Putin is another matter. I don't think that's the case with Mr. Corbyn. I think I would gladly have a cup of tea with Mr. Corbyn, but I would want to engage in discussion with him. I simply would not want to listen to this sloganising, and I think his car, with those banners across it, is unsightly. It should be taken off the road on that principle alone. But as for driving without insurance, silly, really, silly. You can't protest. You can't take a stand if you're simply ignoring the basic rules of our society.